We begin my top 24 remaining tight end rankings. Remember, tight ends that played on Thursday Night Football are not included, so if you see someone like, say, George Kittle missing, that's why. We begin with tight ends that I think are mid to low end tight end twos this week. We have Pat Fryermuth, JT Sanders, Daniel Bellinger, Noah Fant, and Grant Calcaterra. So Pat Fryermuth has at least 48 receiving yards in each of the past 3 weeks. He also has 2 touchdowns in the past 2 weeks. Here against Philadelphia, I do think the sledding is going to be slightly tougher for him, but I do think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have to pass the ball quite a bit to stay in this game. And so I do think that Pat Fryermuth is going to catch a couple passes, but I think in what is a really tough matchup against a defense that allows the seventh fewest points to tight ends, that he is going to be somewhat limited, and there are quite a few other options that I would trust more than him this week. Jatavian Sanders has been a little bit hit or miss this season, but we've seen some really high highs, especially for a rookie tight end. I think here against Dallas, he's going to get a couple grabs, but I'm not projecting a touchdown. This past week, in the absence of Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger had 7 targets and 45 receiving yards. Here against Baltimore, it's definitely a matchup that he can exploit. I don't think he scores a touchdown, but I do think he sees some more involvement in this offense, and I do think he's going to be a solid low-end tight end 2 this week. Noah Fant has seen at least 4 targets in each of the past 4 games in which he's played. Here against Green Bay, it is a matchup that he can exploit. I think he gets a couple chunk gains, but I'm not projecting a touchdown. Grant Calcaterra saw 3 targets this past week. He had 19 yards and a touchdown. I don't think he has a touchdown, but I do think he's a little bit more involved in this matchup against Pittsburgh. They are a defense that you can exploit in terms of tight end production. Now we have tight ends that I think are mid to high end tight end 2s this week. We have Cole Kmet, Noah Gray, Juwan Johnson, Kyle Pitts, and Cade Otton. So Cole Kmet, the last matchup in which they played the Vikings, had 10 targets, including 7 receptions for 64 yards, no touchdown. Then he saw his target totals dip to 3 and 0 in the following weeks. Here against Minnesota, I do think they're going to look to exploit his matchup against their linebackers. And so I do think he's going to have a solid game, but I'm not projecting a touchdown. Noah Gray has seen at least 4 targets in each of the past 4 weeks. Here against Cleveland, it is a matchup that he can exploit. They are better than an average matchup for him. I don't think he scores a touchdown, but I do think he sees a couple grabs in this game and is a decent high floor but low ceiling option. Juwan Johnson had 50 receiving yards and a touchdown this past week. Here against Washington, it is a little bit of a tough matchup. They're slightly better than the median. I don't think he scores a touchdown, but I do think he sees consistent involvement. The only issue is I think his ceiling is limited because I think, at least at this point, Jake Haener is probably going to be the starting quarterback. If that changes, I have more hope for him. But I think due to sheer volume alone, he's a fine tight end too. But I'm projecting, once again, Haener to play. And so it's really tough to trust the pass catchers in this offense. Kyle Pitts has been quite poor for us in the past 3 games in which he's played. Here against Las Vegas, though, it is a matchup that they can exploit. I think he scores a touchdown, but I think he's going to have a limited day otherwise. So Cade Otton only had 3 targets this past week, but he made the most of it, having 70 receiving yards. The game prior to that, he had 7 targets. The return of Mike Evans has definitely lowered his floor and ceiling. Here against the Los Angeles Chargers, I think he's going to get a couple grabs once again, but I don't think the massive upside that we saw from him when Evans was out is really going to play out for the rest of the season. Now we have tight ends that I think are high end tight end 2s to low end tight end 1s. We have Kincaid, Kraft, Schultz, and Andrews. So prior to his multi-game absence, Dalton Kincaid was seeing quite a bit of volume. So he is playing against Detroit. They do allow the fewest points to fantasy tight ends. And so I think the matchup is going to make it quite difficult for him. I think he sees a decent amount of volume and has a decent game, but I'm not projecting a touchdown. Tucker Kraft has had at least 78 yards or a touchdown in each of the past 3 weeks. Here against Seattle, it's definitely a matchup that he can exploit. I don't think he scores a touchdown, but I think he sees a decent amount of volume. Dalton Schultz has seen 7 targets in 2 of the past 3 weeks, and he is coming off a game in which he scored a touchdown. Here against Miami, I expect it to be a pretty high-scoring affair between the 2 teams. I think he gets a couple chunk gains, but I'm not projecting a touchdown. Mark Andrews has scored a touchdown in 6 of the past 8 weeks. Here against the New York Giants, it is the second hardest matchup for tight ends. I don't think he has a massive day from a receptions and yardage total, but I do think he scores a touchdown. If you like what you're seeing and hearing so far, feel free to like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel, and I'd really appreciate it. Remember that players who played on Thursday night, such as George Kittle, are not included in these rankings. So if you notice somebody missing from the Thursday night game, that's why. These rankings are coming out after the game. And make sure you check out my quarterback, running back, and wide receiver rankings as they come out as well. Thanks. Now we have tight ends that I think are in that mid to low end tight end 1 range, but I wouldn't consider in the elite tier. We have Hunter Henry, Zach Ertz, Jake Ferguson, Sam Laporta, Jonnu Smith, Evan Ingram, and TJ Hawkinson. Hunter Henry has seen at least 8 targets in each of the past 3 weeks, including 2 games of 9. Here against Arizona, though, it is going to be a really tough matchup. They allow the 6th fewest points to fantasy tight ends, and his matchup prior to this week had been stellar for fantasy production. I think he sees a decent amount of volume, but I'm not projecting a touchdown. Zach Ertz has scored a touchdown in each of the past 3 weeks. Here against New Orleans, it is a pretty tough matchup, but I do think he extends his touchdown streak to 4. Jake Ferguson is matched up against Carolina. He didn't have a massive week this past week, but Carolina is the matchup that you want. They allowed the most points to the tight end position. Even with Cooper Rush starting, I think he's going to have a decent game. I'm not projecting a touchdown, but I think he gets it done enough to be a solid tight end 1. All right, so Sam Laporta has seen at least 6 targets in 5 of the past 6 weeks. Here against the Buffalo Bills, it is a pretty tough matchup. They allow the 9th fewest points to fantasy tight ends. I don't think he's going to have a massive day from a yardage and receptions total, but I do think he finds the end zone. After having 3 straight games of at least 8 targets, including 2 of 11, Jonnu Smith definitely came back down to earth from a targets perspective. He actually didn't have a reception until overtime, but he did finish the drive with 3 receptions and a touchdown. I don't think he's going to see that few of targets again this week, but I don't think the days of 8 to 11 targets are probably going to happen. They've started to attack the outside with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle more. At least they did this past week. I still think he's going to be a fine tight end for us, and I think he gets it done with a touchdown, but I don't think he's going to have one of these massive performances from a receptions and yardage standpoint. Evan Ingram has seen at least 6 targets in each of the past 5 weeks. I think due to sheer volume alone, he's going to be a tight end 1 for us in fantasy. I'm not projecting a touchdown, and it is the 5th most difficult matchup for fantasy tight ends, but I still think he's going to be the chain mover in this offense and is still going to be a solid tight end 1. TJ Hawkinson has been a little bit inconsistent, but he's seen at least 5 targets in each of the past 3 weeks. Here against Chicago, it's definitely a matchup that he can exploit. And he did go 7 for 114 against them the past time they played. I don't think he's going to have that massive of a game, but I still think that he's a top 5 option for us in fantasy. Now we have tight ends that I think are top 3 options and are realistic candidates to be the tight end 1. We have Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, and Brock Bowers. So Travis Kelce has seen at least 6 targets in each of the past 3 weeks. We know that he has immense upside. I don't think he scores a touchdown in this game, but I still think he's going to be a volume monster, and I think he finishes as a top 3 option. After 2 massive games, Trey McBride came back down to earth. And by came back down to earth, I mean he had 14 fantasy points, which is awesome for a tight end. He's the clear tight end 2, in my opinion, in Dynasty and regular fantasy as well. And I think he's going to have a pretty solid game for us, and I think he finally gets his first receiving touchdown. Brock Bowers is playing against Atlanta this week. I do project Desmond Ridder to start for them, and so while I don't like that, I still think that he's going to see a massive amount of targets in this game. I think he's still the clear tight end 1. He is by far and away their best option. Jacoby Myers is definitely underrated, don't get me wrong, but I think he's going to be the centerpiece of the offense, and I think this past week was a blip on the radar. We've seen a bunch of massive performances from him. He's the clear tight end 1 in Dynasty. He's the tight end 1 in regular fantasy football as well. I think he's going to have a solid game for us, and I think he scores a touchdown. And by the way, I don't project David Njoku to play, so that's why he's not listed in these rankings. And so, just to recap, we have tight ends that I think are mid to low end tight end 2s. We have Freiermuth, Sanders, Bellinger, Fant, and Calcaterra. Tight ends that I think are mid to high end tight end 2s. We have Kmet, Noah Gray, Johnson, Pitts, and Otten. Tight ends that I think are high end tight end 2s to low end tight end 1s this week. We have Kincaid, Kraft, Schultz, and Andrews. Tight ends that I think are mid to low end tight end 1s this week, but probably aren't in that elite tier this week. We have Henry, Ertz, Ferguson, Laporta, Smith, Ingram, and Hawkinson. And then tight ends that I think are in that elite tier and are likely candidates to be the tight end 1 this week. We have Kelce, McBride, and Bowers. All right, so you know the drill. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Is there somebody that I'm not projecting for enough points? I think Will Dissly might be a candidate here. I don't think he's going to have a fantastic game, though. And yeah, make sure you check out my quarterback, running back, and wide receiver rankings videos as they come out as well. And if you like what you've seen and heard in this video, just like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel. Thanks.